This is a very depressing video for me to record, so I'm not going to show you my ugly face. I'm just going to show you the view outside my bedroom window while I speak. The recent events of coronavirus, in which people hoard various items such as toilet paper and have cleaned out the stores of other things such as bread. At first it sent me into a hilarity of laughter at the ridiculousness of it all. That was yesterday. Today I'm depressed, and it's very incisive, this depression, because I'm realizing it's myself that it reminds me of what other people are doing. So I'll explain. But first I'll premise this. Eric Dollard is considered Tesla 2.0. He's the only person on this planet to have replicated all of Tesla's experiments and gone further than that, and understands it as an electrical engineer would understand his craft. And this is rare because nobody else has been able to go this far with Tesla's knowledge. Well, at one point I was told by somebody at a science conference that Eric Dollard had gotten into free energy but got burned. And then later on I found out why, and Eric even admitted to it during one of the conferences in Idaho. The city of Richmond was very curious at what he was doing, and for some reason, Eric doesn't know why, he didn't take the opportunity to become involved with the utility company there at Richmond, California. He backed away, and anyway, because he was doing experiments at a naval shipyard that sent more energy back into the grid than what he was taking out. And it shut down the whole city of Richmond because they weren't accustomed to customers becoming a source of energy, a substantial source. And the upshot of that is that he never got involved with free energy ever again. And he instead now claims that it doesn't exist. He's never seen such a thing that anybody's ever done before, except maybe Chris Carson on a small scale that Eric continues to use under the hood of his car to recharge his car battery. But it doesn't exist in any substantial quantity, and even if it did, it's best, he adds this as a closing thought, even if it did exist, even if free energy was possible, it's best we don't make use of it because we're gluttons, we're hogs for energy, powering all of our monster devices, our monster trucks, and we'd probably blow up the planet in the course of overcharging ourselves, inducing or suffusing too much energy into ourselves and our environment out of gluttony, out of just pig-headedness, that we want more and more energy and we don't care about the consequences. Well, I think I understand a scenario that might be an attempt to explain why is Eric being so conservative. I'm okay, he got personally burned, but why does he think that we don't deserve free energy? Well, I think I know a possible explanation, and here we go. Sorry for the coughing. I'm not in the perfect health. I was told of a planet by Charlie Lutz. Charlie Lutz is a guy I like to quote because he's deceased, but when he was alive, he gave lectures to transcendental meditators, to advanced lectures, to help them understand their place in the world as meditators, and he would give us a lot of background information that you wouldn't get from other places. He was like this organizational pivotal point that would just absorb and extract all this information that is really way out there. Well, one of the things he mentioned was that there was, I'm sorry, okay, there was this crazy scientist who blew up a planet in our solar system, and the planet was called Maldek. Now, if you look up questions on Quora concerning has the asteroid belt ever been a planet before, the physicists will always tell you, and I asked an astrophysicist at California State University at California State University at Northridge. I had an astrophysics teacher, and I asked him the same question: was the asteroid belt previously a planet? And he said, no, there's not enough material there to be constituted a solid planet. Oh, what if it wasn't solid? What if planets are hollow? Oh, that's not impossible. Defies the laws of physics, yada, yada. Well, there were these posts I ran across today that prompted me to think a little bit, because they're in the space, the Quora space called electrical science, which Franco, I forget his middle name, Cordelletti is his last name in Italian. He's the only person on Quora who seems to agree with me on using Eric as a role model. But how well do we understand Eric? Franco understands him from the standpoint of an electrical engineer because that's his background. So he's able to explain those kinds of things much better than I could even approach to do, because it's very technical. Electrical science is very technical. I just look for the big picture, and I look for analogies and draw conclusions and similarities, and I try to look at the human side, the human interest story too. For instance, what was the prior incarnation of Nikola Tesla in which he gained all this information that he possesses in the lifespan that we know him of? Well, he was a student of a person who could possibly have been a very crazy scientist who managed to blow up Maldek. And here's how I think it managed, because Nikola was a little nuts himself. He had this silly notion that he would ionize or charge up the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, and turn it on. Turn it into a gigantic sky of fluorescence, like a fluorescent bulb. You hold a fluorescent bulb up in an electrostatic field and it starts to light up and provide illumination. Well, he wanted to do that with the upper atmosphere and turn it on like a light switch, but it would be on all the time across the entire planet. I mean, that's a little nuts. You'd upset the biology, the biological cycles of all plants and animals who need a time of rest. Or let's put it this way, a time of darkness, in which some of them, like you and I, need a time of rest, while others need to be active at night, and they sleep by day. I mean, there's this diurnal cycle. It would have screwed everything up. That's where you see the nuttiness of a scientist, when they start suggesting ideas that are not exactly a good idea. Well, it could possibly be, and he shared or inherited that characteristic from his teacher, who was even nuttier than he. And that teacher may have been a theoretical physics teacher several hundreds of thousands of years ago, who postulated the following idea: why don't we enlarge our planet? Why don't we do this by enlarging the energy at the core of this hollow planet, because planets are hollow, by let's see if I state this correctly, using a three-way point system. You only need two. If you want more of something, you go somewhere else to get it and you bring it to yourself, right? But that could create instability because it's too drastic a change by the parties involved. So in order to ease your way into this, you use a three-point system in which you yourself is the catalyst to get energy from a second point. Let's see if I'm saying this correctly. And you have to use the third point as the stabilizing agent. I forget how that works now. Well, I think what it was a three-point system involving Maldek, the planet I'm hypothesizing is located in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. But it involved Jupiter and the Sun. And I think the intention was it should be at the expense of the Sun predominantly, because the Sun can afford to lose some of its energy, mass, whatever you want to call it. Because at this point, physicists really don't have a clue, thinking it's solid like the planets are solid. Yeah, right. Um, but it also involved Jupiter. Enlarging Maldek, I suspect at the expense of Jupiter nearby, but using, kind of like, let's say, using Jupiter as a fulcrum and the sun as the opposite side of a lever, while you are sitting on this side of the lever and you are Maldek from that point of view. So think of it as a three-point system of leverage in which you need a lever point, a fulcrum point, and that would be Jupiter, possibly, I'm guessing, and the sun being on the other side. So that the loss of energy from Jupiter is minor because it's being used as a pivotal point. Most of the loss would be from the sun, who can afford to give up something of substantial size or mass or energy, whatever, and Maldek to gain it. Now, why would somebody want to do that? Well, there's two reasons. There's a materialistic way of looking at it and an energetic way of looking at it. Energetically, there's more power that you're providing to the center of the planet to run the planet. And anytime you have power nearby of an increased quantity, it means more energy for everyone. The plants, the animals, the creatures living on it, and all of our circuits, which are creatures too, which we want to give life. And so it provides more energy for everyone. But it also provides more matter in the sense that the size of the planet expands, making us think, those of us who still think planets are solid, it enlarges the size and enlarges the gravity that goes with it. Now, we claim that, when we think about it, dinosaurs became extinct, and the only thing we know at the time of their extinction, for any certainty of facts, is that there was this kind of a cloud cover that was global in scale for a certain duration, a very long duration, long enough to create something equivalent to nuclear winter, in which it was cold all the time. And as you know, dinosaurs are based on lizards. Originally their skeletal structure is based on the bird, but their metabolism is based on the lizard, in which they are cold-blooded, like fish. And without the sun to warm their bodies in the daytime, they can't move around and hunt for food. They'd starve just because they'd be sitting around hibernating all the time until they starve to death. So that's the only thing we know. And how that came about, we don't know. But if it was not some kind of planetoid object that hit the Earth, Velikovsky was a Russian who proposed that idea. It hit in the area of the Caribbean, creating that circular appearance to the Caribbean, the Yucatan Peninsula, and it curves around to the Gulf of Mexico, the curls around the coastline of Texas and the sides of Mexico. All of it looks like a circular hole that some meteor crashed there, or huge asteroid or meteorite. Quite a large one. Could have created nuclear winter, but regardless, it could have been whatever happened. In all likelihood, it must have been a pretty seismic event that would have caused a lot of volcanic action, spewing a lot of smoke and ash into the atmosphere. That could be the cause of a nuclear winter too. Well, what would cause all that volcanic activity? Well, maybe the planet simply decided to get bigger, not because an asteroid hit it, but because some goofball theoretical physicist scientist decided to send more energy into the center, enlarging the size of the planet, and that created the volcanic activity. So that's one way to get rid of dinosaurs, is just enlarge this, because when the planet is smaller, the gravity is smaller. Not because there's less mass, but because the functional operation at the center of the hollow planet is putting out less gravity, which causes the planet to be smaller. Because the whole point of gravity anyway is it's only one half of the situation. The other half is levity. And both together create buoyancy, in which the shell of a hollow planet floats at its happy medium between not too close to the center of mass and not too far away. unless you change the energy characteristic at the center of the hollow planet or the center of the hollow star, as you may, whichever example you wish to use. If you change the energy at the center, you change the size of that planet because you're changing the point at which the shell is going to float away from the center, provided it's stable, relatively stable. Nothing upsets it. It has a nice tiny spin, a gyroscopic spin we call the diurnal cycle, and that helps stabilize that shell so that for the most part there's no reason for it to fragment into 1,000 pieces. Now, if you're enlarging the size of the planet, which in the case of the Earth would cause the extinction of the dinosaurs because they could not handle the increased gravitational forces exerting force upon their skeletal structure, so they'd become extinct overnight, and the small mammals roaming about would survive. Well, regardless of what multiple intentions may have been there to enlarge the energy of the planet or extinguish large dinosaurs, because it wasn't the Earth, this is now on a different planet I'm talking about, this is hypothetical Maldek in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Whatever the reason, I think it was a 3-point system to slow down the process of increasing the energy and or mass of the planet at a nice, easy pace. Now, enlargement versus shrinkage may be reversible. The problem is, I think what happened was, after the death of this crazy scientist, it was postulated that, oops, we've been too greedy, taking energy we don't need, enlarging this planet. It's time to reverse the situation. But they cut corners. And instead of using a 3-point system to make sure it was gradual and stable, they used a 2-point system, and the whole thing shrank so rapidly it just collapsed in on itself. It imploded, causing so much of its material to leave the orbital plane of that planet, the orbital path, I should say, so that even though it was a shell of a planet, not solid, to even a greater degree than that, has the matter of the material substance of the planet been escaped or at high velocity enough to leave that orbital path, so as to bring us to the conclusion, present-day physicists, that there's no way it could have been a planet, and may have also caused the enlargement of Jupiter. And because it was a 2-point system to collapse the planet, I think what they decided was to send all the energy at the center of the planet Maldek to the center of Jupiter and enlarge it, and it enlarged it too much. Now, it might have been a 3-point system, but they may not have bothered to depend on the anchoring influence of the sun to any great degree. In other words, they cut corners in some manner of speaking that accelerated the process in reverse direction. So instead of using, there you go, they might have used the sun as the fulcrum and Jupiter as the source, or the goal at this point, since they were reversing direction of energy flow, taking it away from the center of Maldek and sending it back into the center of Jupiter. So the upshot is, when you consider both phases, both actions, the upshot is in the enlargement of Jupiter at the expense of the sun, but done too rapidly during the second period for the stability of Maldek to maintain itself. And it may have also been at the cost of Maldek, because you always have to have some cost, because somebody has to be the catalyst to orchestrate these events of the movement of energy from point B to point C. Meanwhile, you're point A, making all this happen. So it's going to cost you something. But being the catalyst, it doesn't cost you too much. But what if it went out of hand because they used the wrong 3-point system? They used the sun as the fulcrum and Jupiter as the target where to send the energy to. So you don't have the stabilizing influence of the sun anymore at the other end to slow everything down. Instead, you have it as the fulcrum, which may have had the opposite effect. It may have accelerated the whole process rather than slow it down. That's what my feeling is. Um, so the rest is other parts of information I learned 20 years ago when I was studying the golden ratio. Is that why do we have a small segment of the population on Earth who are very highly evolved, and the predominant population on the planet Earth is not? They're young souls. They're babies. They're trying to get along or evolve very quickly by mimicking what everyone else is doing. And so they steal because that's all they know. How to survive is to steal. How to grow and learn quickly is to steal. So when China steals our ideas, it's because that's their consciousness. They're just babies. Their soul is a baby. It's a fresh new soul that doesn't have a whole lot of experience. And when you're a new soul, a young soul, there's a lot of allowance made. Mother Nature makes for a lot of allowance. You can do a lot of things and get away with it because you don't know any better. So you just do whatever you can, do whatever you want. So they're stealing from us. So what? But they are indigenous. They're native to the planet Earth, and so in their soul, they have only one memory, and that's for the golden ratio. But the old souls, who form the more advanced, technologically advanced societies on this planet, have the memory of the prior aesthetic theme from Maldek, which is the silver ratio. The silver ratio comes out of the number series that John Pell, the mathematician John Pell, created. 1, 2, 5, 12, 29, 70. It's a very fastly evolving number series, unlike the Fibonacci series, in which you take the prior number and add it to the current number to get the next number. With the Pell series of numbers, you double the last number, you add it, am I saying that right? Yes, you add it to the prior number to get the next number. So it grows very quickly. It grows at the rate of 1 plus the square root of 2, which is 2.414. Unlike the Fibonacci series, grows at the rate of 1.618, because you simply take the last number and add it to the prior number. You don't do any doubling whatsoever. Now, the silver ratio is the silver ratio itself is in the dimensionality of the United States dollar bill, the length versus the height, while the golden ratio is in the dimensionality ratio proportion of our credit cards that are worldwide. So, when you look at aesthetic themes, you're looking at how the nervous system appreciates harmony and disharmony in all of its aesthetic appreciations, which involves not just music, but how we perceive color and geometry, taste and smell and touch, and also impacts astrology, the chakras, Sanskrit, and all of our languages, because these are all aesthetic appreciations. But that's the backdrop to where I'm coming from when I talk about planets. I appreciate planets because I understand that the planetary anthropology, the anthropology of a whole planet, is different on different planets. Well, that's what I used to say. Okay, I got to correct myself. It's different in different solar systems. Every solar system has its own theme for that solar system. The reason why Earth is uniquely different from the other planets in our solar system is because it's an import. According to Charlie Lutz, here we go again, the Earth was dragged in here from the Pleiades with the cetaceans on board. All the whales, the dolphins, the porpoises. They are the original inhabitants of planet Earth. And there are some theorists who are proposing the idea that there was no Pangaea when you go back far enough. No one single continent. The whole planet Earth was just covered in water 100%. And that makes perfect sense because dolphins don't need land. They need water. And they're very highly intelligent mammals because they are human. And that's something else we don't appreciate about them. They are not animals. They are humans. They're not fish. They're not animals. They're humans because they know what God is. Charlie Lutz would always say that God put a little piece of himself in the act of orgasm. And thus, it's only the human who knows what sex is, because they know that God is in sex. and why we view sex the way we do. Well, dolphins have a much more Wilhelm Reich approach. They don't suppress their sexual instincts, but that doesn't make them animals. They just don't operate under the repressive human attitude when it comes to sex and emotions and the use of the vital force, such as we do. And they don't fight wars either, for the same, I think, for the same reason, pretty much. I think our self-repression of our sexual energy, our vital energy, because Wilhelm Reich was using sexual in a very broad sense, meaning more than just sex. It was just the vital force, period. The passion in life, the passion we have for pursuing our goals. You know, it's not about sex. It's about putting ourselves in motion, because that's the rajas, the rajoguna, the passion of mobilizing ourselves to accomplish a task, in some cases requiring a lot of passion to overcome a very difficult task. So the dolphins simply don't repress it. They just channel it completely, 100%. And you know what? I think they probably use 100% of their brain for that very reason. They don't repress their passions. Anyway, so we were very destructive on Maldek, and it carried over to the planet of the moon, because when we reincarnated after the destruction of Maldek, we had to reincarnate somewhere. And I think the Earth was brought here for that reason, because we needed a place to finish out our evolution of incarnations. But the moon was a living planet, and we did what Nikola Tesla suggested but never got around to doing. We energized the upper stratosphere of the moon's atmosphere, causing it to reach escape velocity, in which the upper atmosphere just peeled away like layers of an onion until there was nothing left, as it is today, a dead planetoid object. But while it was peeling away, the survivors of the destruction of Maldek, living on the moon at the time, had enough time on their hands to build ships and come to the planet Earth, as Charlie said, where they were known as the Gray People, because they were gray. This might be the basis for all the alien stories of gray-skinned aliens. They may have been gray because of Argyria, because they were heavily into the use of silver. But regardless, they came into the continent of Atlantis during the third root race of Atlantis, which would put it at the red race. The red man, the Native American race, was more distinctly red at that time than they are today, obviously. But it was the third root race of Atlantis, and he said the Gray People moved immediately to the forefront of civilization and have remained there ever since. Unfortunately, we do have destructive tendencies of gluttony. You know, like Hitler, they wanted Poland, you know. Say, oh, I just think I'll craft. Nobody else wants Poland. I think I'll take it. You know, it's that kind of idiotic greed. And that might have been what was behind the idiocy of that infamously nutty professor of Nikola Tesla, who thought he could enlarge the planet's energy and possibly the matter and mass and gravity as well by stealing it from a bunch of other celestial objects, and get away with it and not know that maybe after he's dead, somebody might take that technology and misuse it in a very stupid fashion and destroy the planet in the course of doing so. That would be pretty dumb. Anywho, so that concludes my depressing video. Now I'm not so depressed having spoken about it, but I had to eat a lot of vegan ice cream with a lot of chocolate chips to, oh God, it was tough covering this. This is very depressing. But I feel a little better now, having cleansed my, get this off my chest. I've been going through cleansing lately, detoxification of toxemia, and so it stands to reason I'd come across this insight that I couldn't have come across otherwise had I not put myself through that process of detoxification to clear my mind so that I can see more deeply into my soul what this soul memory is that I've only had tastes of over the course of the last 20 years, just tiny little glimpses. Now, Eric Dollard, if I wanted to epitomize him or characterize him, I should say, in some previous incarnation, I'd say, well, you know, the guy sounds like Aristotle, who was a very practical fellow, unlike Plato, who was very much the idealist, the wifey, foofy idealist, um, who was so wafy and pale, vulnerable, that he had to stay home sick in bed while his master Socrates killed himself. I mean, if you read what little I've read of the story, Plato wasn't there at the time that Socrates drank his hemlock. Plato was home sick in bed. He just couldn't handle it. It was just too upsetting for him. He probably had a nervous breakdown. He's just, oh shit, my master's gonna kill himself. This is really fucked up Greece we're living in. Sorry for my language, but when you feel that bad, I guess you use the language appropriate to how you feel. But I think Aristotle is a bit sturdier fellow, much more grounded in reality, and that's the way I would characterize Eric Dollard, because he's saying what is true. We don't deserve free energy. It's funny. We think, oh, free energy is not possible. Why do we think it? Because the military wants to keep it all to itself. But do we really deserve it? Maybe the military thinks we don't deserve it. I've read that, and I used to think that's hogwash. We should all have freedom of information, and then be free to make up our own minds about what we're going to do with what we have. All the various options we could have if we knew any better. And after what's gone on this past couple of days, or even just yesterday, everything getting shut down from the coronavirus, and stay home and don't see anyone, and good grief, this is like the Dark Ages, because, well, we're ignorant, we don't know how to use silver. But all the hoarding, though, I mean, it's true, I do hoard myself whenever I go shopping, but not because I think it's going to disappear off the shelf, but because I don't think I'm going to have the money next month, so I hoard. I'd rather have the food in my cupboard than, oh, I got money in the bank. No, plenty of times I have not had money in the bank, and I have had to live off of what I had in the cupboard. So I learned it's very important for me to hoard, because I don't have a stable income. So those are my excuses. But be that as it may, it was very depressing this morning, the aftermath of what has been happening of late. And I guess it helped me peer back into my past. That, and the fact that I've been taking activated charcoal at night and fasting from sundown to sunup, so that I can purify my perception and see more clearly my guilt, instead of laughing over everyone else's. And my guilt is depressing. It's very depressing. It's extremely depressing. Anyway, so Eric, I guess you're right. We don't deserve free energy. We're too nutty. I'm too nutty. And here I am promoting it. Nobody's listening to me except those who already understand and agree. I'm not making any converts. That's for sure. You either already agree or you don't already agree. And it's pretty much nobody's jumping fences at this point. At least I haven't heard of any people doing that. And it'll be a long time before this kind of information about free energy is rediscovered, because all of it's going to die. It's just not going to stay alive. If this coronavirus is any indication of what we have in store for us, it could just get worse. Other things come up later that will shake this globe to its foundation. And like the fall of Rome, we'll fall into a kind of Dark Ages, in the sense that we'll survive and we'll be comfortable and we'll be blessed out like crazy, but all of the hard-ass technology that we have may take a while to reacquire and then surpass. It may take 1,000 years, in fact. Because we won't have the motivation, because we'll be so blissed out from all the bliss encircling the planet, to pursue a gluttony of energy in our devices, in our appliances. So why bother? I'll just put another log on the fire, Anyway, very grim. Grim plus glum makes glum. Glim. Glim out. A dim. Oh, I see. A dim plus. Okay, whatever. You combine some words and you get a new word, and it doesn't make any sense anymore. Okay, enough. See, I talked about this depressing backdrop to history, ancient history. But all the time you look at this beautiful blue sky and the new paint job they did on the building, well, on all of the buildings, multicolored colors to our buildings. Unfortunately, the trees over here are no longer in bloom, so they were a few weeks ago. Fruitless plum trees, I think they are, or cherry trees. I think, well, whatever. They were tiny little white blossoms. They've all fallen now. Anyway, enough of my blabbling.